Good afternoon. Sorry I'm late. Welcome to our representatives from Europe and elsewhere here. Welcome back, as always, Linda. Let me start with a brief announcement designed to clear up confusion. And the confusion is over Dr. Hamre's participation in events at the Women's Memorial and the ceremony tomorrow to mark the 50th anniversary of women in the armed services. First, he's speaking this afternoon at 5:50 at the Women's Memorial. It's part of a ceremony to present an award to former Secretary Perry, and the award will be presented at 6 o'clock by Hillary Rodham Clinton, the First Lady. But Secretary Perry won't be there. The award will be presented to his wife, Lee Perry. And this is to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the full integration of women into the armed services. Second, tomorrow at 2, at the Women in Military Service Memorial in Arlington National Cemetery, Dr. Hamre, the Deputy Secretary of Defense, will be the keynote speaker at a ceremony also celebrating the 50th anniversary of the Women's Armed Services Integration Act of 1948. So that's clear. I'll take your questions. Charlie.
Ken, the Energy Department today released the latest in a series of films on, historical films, I guess, on nuclear tests. And I believe, unless I'm mistaken, that it includes films of tests in space in the 60s. Have you anything on that?
I think you're talking about the little known Historical Nuclear Weapons Test Film Festival, which began yesterday under the auspices of the Department of Energy. And all I can tell you is that, that this Historical Nuclear Weapons Test Film Festival does in fact include some film of atmospheric tests of nuclear weapons that were conducted about 25 years ago. 35 years ago. We have not conducted any atmospheric tests since the early 1960s. So they do have some tests of atmospheric, some film of atmospheric tests that took place in 1962 and perhaps 1963.
But there's nothing new about that. I mean,
no, this is basically a declassification exercise of films that were taken of nuclear tests.
And correct me if I'm wrong, these are not tests in space. These are simply atmospheric tests.
They're upper atmospheric. They are not in space. We believe that, that they were done totally within the atmosphere. But you should talk to the Department of Energy about this. They're the experts. It turns out that all of our nuclear experts are now in Brussels, so they're not available to talk about this. And the right experts are at Energy. Yes?
Regarding the NATO exercise, air power exercise coming up, do you have any details at all on when, the scope, what U.S. forces will participate?
No, those details haven't been worked out yet. Let me explain to you what happened. Today, the NATO defense ministers instructed the NATO military authorities to conduct an exercise, an air power exercise in Albania and Macedonia. They have left the details of that up to NATO military planners. So NATO military planners at Allied Forces South in Naples and Air South, it's called Allied Forces South Air Division in Italy, in Vicenza, will start, or have started this planning probably today. It'll probably take them a day or two to complete the plans, and I would anticipate that the exercise would happen very quickly. But basic questions as exactly what the exercise will involve, which countries will participate, and which forces those participants will devote to the exercise haven't been worked out, nor has the length of the exercise or the specific details of it. We do not have a carrier in the Mediterranean right now. The Eisenhower left yesterday, and it will take her about 2 weeks to get into the Mediterranean. We do have a amphibious ready group, the WASP, about a day away from this area. I think it's this amphibious ready group is now at a port call in Turkey. The WASP has 5 Harriers on it and about 20 helicopters that could participate in this exercise. Of course, other nations have carriers. The British, the French, and the Italians have carriers. I don't know the disposition of those carriers right now. We have at Aviano 2 squadrons of F-16s, Cs and Ds, about 18, I think there are 18 aircraft per squadron. They're part of the 31st Fighter Wing, and I would anticipate that they would participate in this exercise, but those details have not been worked out yet. They will be done relatively soon.
Did you say, I'm sorry, the amphibious ready group could or would or is likely to, along with the planes from Aviano?
I didn't say that it would. I just said that it's in the area. That the WASP does have some Harriers on board that theoretically would be able to participate. I was basically just listing U.S. military assets nearby that would be available for participating in this exercise. I'm not saying they'll be selected to participate, but they would certainly be available to participate in the exercise.
What's the message that this exercise is intended to convey?
I think the message is very clear, and it's directed entirely at President Milosevic, and that is that NATO is able and willing, if necessary, to use air power in this area. The exercise will show that we're ready, that we are positioned, and that we're willing to move if we have to.
Is this a dress rehearsal for airstrikes?
It is decidedly not a rehearsal for airstrikes. It is an exercise of a multilateral NATO Air Force in the area. It's not a rehearsal for anything. As you know, today also the defense ministers in Brussels instructed the military authorities to accelerate planning on a wide range of possible military options that could be used to back diplomacy in Kosovo. And it should be very clear that we see the military options being planned as a way to strengthen the hand of diplomats trying to work for a ceasefire and for a political settlement in Kosovo. We hope that military options won't have to be used, that diplomacy will prevail. But if that doesn't work, the planners will have developed a list of options, and then the political authorities in each one of the countries will have to decide whether they think these options are acceptable and whether they're the right course to take to back up diplomacy.
But when you say that this exercise will show that NATO is able and willing to act, isn't that an implicit threat of airstrikes?
Well, I think that it's an exercise being conducted while planners are looking at military options that might be necessary or desirable to enforce diplomatic options.
Will this be a live fire exercise, live bombs?
Those are among the details that have to be worked out, and NATO planners will be doing that very soon, I would expect.
Can we assume that this list of options would include possible airstrikes?
Well, the Secretary General Solana said that they would include the possible use of air power over Kosovo.
What about the deployment of NATO ground troops, including U.S. troops?
Well, I think that it's premature to talk about that now. The planners are coming up with a list of options. Once the list of options is presented to NATO, it will be up to the political leadership of each country to decide whether the options are acceptable, and if they are, what their degree of participation will be. We're a long way from that right now. I won't say a long way. I would anticipate that the planning would be done relatively soon. Could be done early. It could be done next week sometime. But there'll have to be a second round of discussions after the options are presented as to how to proceed, which options to pick and which ones not to pick.
But generally, is the United States opposed to the deployment of U.S. troops to Kosovo?
I think we want to see right now how well diplomacy succeeds, and we want to see what sort of options the NATO planners come up with.
Do we expect that the exercise would include any parachuting of equipment or ground troops as part of the exercise, dropping in?
I think that's unlikely, but the NATO planners will be coming up with the details of the exercise. They haven't done that yet, so it's premature to talk specifically about what the exercises will involve. But my guess is that that's not one of the things they're looking at. They're looking at reconnaissance, surveillance, possibly the delivery of humanitarian goods, and ways that air power could be used in that area. Those are among the issues. Yes.
For this particular exercise in Albania, are you planning to use your forces and bases in Greece and Turkey?
Well, I think again that's the type of issue that's being worked out by the planners. As I said, we, the United States, have forces in Aviano, ready air forces there, and also we have the WASP in the area. But the planners will have to decide, one, what the exercise is going to be, two, how large it's going to be, three, how many countries will participate, and four, what the contribution of each country will be. And that's what they'll be working on over the next hours and days.
You said Macedonia or Fyro?
Well, as we've discussed many times before, I use Macedonia as an abbreviation for the former republic, former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia. And my stumbling over that long name explains why I use Macedonia as an abbreviation. Barbara.
You lost me at one point. When you were talking about reconnaissance, surveillance, delivery of humanitarian goods, and use of air power, you just lost me. Were you talking about the upcoming air power exercise?
I'm talking about exercises. I'm talking about the exercise.
Exercise. So that would be some of the missions that you would want that the exercise would...
Those are possible missions that may be part of the exercise. There could be more. Those are just illustrative.
And when you said the ways in which air power could be used, did you mean that possible mission involves dropping of ordnance?
It could, but that hasn't been decided. Those are the issues that are being worked out by NATO planners now.
You say that the planners will decide what countries take part in that. Can we assume that the United States definitely will take part in this?
Well, I think it's a very valid assumption, but as I say, until the details are worked out and there's a firm plan, it's probably premature to talk about specifics. Yes.
So, when you say that this is to demonstrate to Milosevic that NATO can exercise air power in the region, wouldn't he already know that?
Well, maybe he's forgot. And maybe he's forgotten that NATO has shown a willingness to use effective air power in the past. And so this will be a reminder.
Would NATO consider the use of air power against the rebels, since the rebels are on occasion the aggressor?
Well, that's a very interesting point. It's very clear that the defense ministers are concerned about provocative acts on both sides, both by the Kosovar Albanians and also by the Serb police and military forces in Kosovo. There is not going to be a settlement here. There's not going to be a ceasefire unless both sides agree to it. And one of the things that was discussed were ways that we can, the diplomatic and military actions that can be found that impose restraint on both sides of the controversy.
Some people who are looking at this situation are applying the so-called Bosnia model to this. That is, the airstrikes that are generally agreed to help bring the Bosnian Serbs to the peace table at Dayton. Isn't this situation somewhat different from the situation that they were faced in Bosnia when airstrikes were employed?
Well, yeah, there are factual and legal differences here. The President alluded to those yesterday. And if you read the NATO statement that was issued in Brussels today, they talk in several places about taking legally acceptable or relevant actions, and I think it's very clear that the diplomats and the military authorities will do what they can to recognize these differences.
Would it require a UN resolution in order for NATO to take military action in
No,
Serbia?
it's not our view. It's not the view of the United States that a UN action is required.
What's the view of other NATO countries?
Well, you have to ask them, but clearly the United States believes that NATO has the right to protect stability in Europe without a UN action. UN action would be obviously is always a good thing to have because it shows that other nations share NATO's concern, but it is the U.S. view that NATO can act on its own. Yes.
Do you think that Milosevic's military forces could, in this exercise or further down the road, threaten U.S. or NATO air forces, and do you see any need to place forces with any kind of air defense protection or any of that sort of thing?
Well, to the extent that, first of all, I would not anticipate that air defenses would be a problem for this exercise, because the exercise won't be in Kosovo. It'll be in Albania and Macedonia. And we would only carry out the exercise there if those countries agreed to do it. I suspect they will, because they've appealed, actually, for more international support and involvement. Beyond that, if the NATO military authorities recommend the use of air power over Kosovo, and if the governments agree that that's the right way to go, I think that every country that participates in any air action over Kosovo would be very aware of the air defense environment and the threats that they would face. And as you know, we took extraordinary measures in Bosnia to protect our planes and our pilots, and I think we'd do exactly the same thing over Kosovo, which is part of Serbia. Yes?
Can I ask, on Tuesday, if the United States was using UAVs over Kosovo, and I thought you agreed to take the question, apparently you didn't.
Did I agree to take the question?
I
So now you want me to take it? I'll take
I
it.
think you did.
All right.
Is the United States using UAVs over Kosovo?
I'll take the question.
Because you had said before, I believe, that there was a problem in getting reconnaissance from there because they were not
No, what I
allowing
said-
observers.
Well, yeah, well, I said that they were not allowing observers on the ground. Since then, they have agreed to allow OSCE and other observers in. I don't know how many are in, but they have changed their policy. And they've allowed some diplomatic observers to go in, and my understanding was that they were supposed to allow press people to go in with the diplomats, but I haven't seen reports that that's happened.
Anyway, if you take the question.
I will. Yes.
Three Greek deputies, members of the Committee on Defense of the Greek Parliament, are here today at the Pentagon for meetings and consultations with the DoD officials. Do you have anything on that?
Well, you probably know more about this meeting than I do, but you're right. There are three Greek parliamentarians visiting the Pentagon today as part of our continuing series of meetings with Greece, a NATO ally. They're meeting with John Berry, who's the Director of European Policy, and they're talking about a range of defense issues.
The other day, the Greek Undersecretary of Defense, Mr. Apostolakis, was here for talks too with the DoD officials. May we have a readout on that?
A readout?
Yes. Do we know anything?
The meeting was held in Williamsburg at the end of May, I believe. He met principally with Jan Lodel, the Principal Deputy Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, and there again we talked about a wide range of shared defense and
I was told that
security issues.
I was told that your officials were very impressed about his remarks on the status quo of the Aegean, and may we know the reason for dissatisfaction?
Well, one of the things that we've been satisfied with recently is the statements by Greece and Turkey that they'll accept the confidence-building measures that have been proposed by or engineered by the Secretary General of NATO, Mr. Solana. And we understand that both Greece and Turkey have said that they plan to implement these confidence-building measures, and that is very pleasing to us, and I think it's also a step towards stability in the Aegean.
But since this arrangement is partitioning the areas of operational responsibilities in the airspace and in the sea of the Aegean, with the exception, of course, for the time being, of the Greek islets similar to EMEA, I'm wondering how this new arrangement affects your military presence in the Aegean Sea area from the bilateral point of view.
Well, I'm not positive that partition is the right characterization for the confidence-building measures, as I understand them, and I'd have to, before accepting that term, maybe reread the confidence-building measures. But having said that, I doubt if there'll be a major impact on our on the U.S. Force deployments in the Aegean. But I'd be glad to check that and get back to you.
Since Undersecretary Lodal played a very crucial role in those talks in Brussels for this arrangement, it's possible to have a special briefing so we can see the technicalities of this agreement.
I'm sorry, a special briefing on the confidence-building measures?
With Mr. Lodal.
Well, it might be more appropriate for Mr. Solana to do that because he's the father of these confidence-building measures, and it seems to me that he should get the full credit and the full opportunity to brief the Greek and Turkish press on the import of these measures. Yes.
Another topic, Operation Tailwind. Can you just tell us if the Pentagon's made any progress in finding any key evidence that would either confirm or refute CNN's report of last Sunday night?
Several days ago, the Secretary of Defense, in fact on Tuesday, just 2 days ago, the Secretary of Defense formally asked the Secretary of the Air Force, the Secretary of the Army, and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs to conduct investigations into the report and to get back to him in 30 days. So they've now had 2 out of 30 days to do this. I'm not aware that there is any new information that has come out on this. There's certainly, I'm not aware of any information that's come out to support the charges that or the assertion that sarin gas was used by U.S. forces on U.S. forces in Laos in September of 1970. But I think we need to let the process work. The investigation was requested, the review was requested by the Secretary so we could get to the bottom of this quickly and efficiently, and we've got 28 days to go.
Will you at any point release the, give us some sort of idea of how many people are working on this and how many hours they're spending, so we can have some kind of a confidence that this was in fact a thorough investigation and review?
Well, I think that it's premature to make that, at the end we will tell you, yes, our goal here is to produce reports in which everyone can have confidence. And we will do what we need to do to make sure that the public does have confidence in our findings.
Now, you said that they were supposed to get back in about 30 days. Do you anticipate that the declassification process for some of the documents involved will be done by them? Will that be a process that takes longer than 30 days?
I think the declassification process is largely complete, and I would hope that the documents will be available soon. Some may be available as early as today, but there will be certainly other documents available before the end of the 30-day review period. This just in. No UAVs over Kosovo. We took the question and we answered it. This is rare.
I realize you said you didn't want to make incremental reports, but have you anything new to offer on the Tomb of the Unknown? Like how's it progressing, or is you just?
I believe that we got a very good DNA sample from the remains, and now the next step is to begin matching. I don't know how long that's going to take, but So far, the two parts of the examination have gone extremely well. And as you know, there is first looking at the remains, measuring them, testing them in various ways, and then taking a sample from the remains. There's sort of an anthropological part of the investigation, and then the laboratory part of the investigation, which involves getting a sample from the remains. And I believe we did get a good sample, which puts us in a good position now to start matching. And I don't know how long that will take. We will obviously, as soon as we complete that phase, if we can complete it, get back to you and give you a full report.
Two questions on that. If you got the good samples, that give you more confidence that you can make an identification, and have all of the have members of each of the 9 families agreed to provide matching information for tests.
I'm not sure that representatives from all 9 families have agreed. I think we may have agreement from most, but I'll have to double check. The last I checked, I think we had agreement from 7 or 8. It's unclear, of course, whether it's necessary to have matches from all 9 families. That's one of the things we'll decide as we go through this process.
And do you have? I'm sorry. Does getting a good sample give you more confidence that you will be able to?
Well, certainly, yes, it does give us more confidence, but it doesn't give us 100% confidence. And as the experts explained here before the exhumation took place, this is a complex process and it has many elements to it, but certainly crucial to a confident identification is a good DNA match.
Ken, did the other,
Yeah.
sorry, did the other 2 families refuse to give
I
samples?
don't know. I'll just have to check on
All right.
this. And you remember, this is a process, and any family could change its mind one way or the other. In general, I want to say the families have been extremely cooperative and extremely understanding. But I can't speak for the whole universe of the 9 families, and we'll try to get back to you on that.
When you say but it might not be necessary, are you implying by that there might be a process where they would, for instance, try the most likely matches first and work their way through? In other words, you might not have to get samples from everybody if you're...
Well,
Is that what you're implying?
Yeah,
when
I'm
you say-
suggesting that if there were, I mean, I think everybody at the beginning of this process, and certainly based on the briefings, the many briefings you got here, people have focused on a very small number of candidates as the leading candidates for match. And so I think our goal would be to start with the most likely matches. And if we get something, then we'll verify that as best we can. But these are technical details that maybe I should get one of the doctors or the experts back to talk about, one of the DNA matching people.
Have the leading candidates, meaning the leading 2 candidates, families of the leading 2 candidates, agreed to test? Matching tests.
Sorry?
Have the
Yes, they
families
have.
of the
They
leading
have,
2
yes.
candidates?
This is another bulletin in. 7 out of 9 families have agreed. 1 has refused. And in 1, there's no maternal linear descendant from whom to get a match. Remember, this myocardial DNA matching requires a sample from somebody in the maternal line. So there are now 8 possible matches we can get, but 1 family has said no.
Including the 2 outstanding candidates, or at least highly publicized candidates.
The two considered to be the most likely candidates of those families have both agreed.
Just one other question. Has there been any decision made about if an identification is made about whether to put any other remains in the tomb of the unknowns?
That hasn't been decided yet. One of the big issues here, and that won't be decided after considerable consultations with families and veterans groups and Congress and others. One of the issues we face here is whether we've reached a point in science where we might have to assume that if not today, but sometime in the relatively near future, we would be able perhaps to identify almost all remains from the recent past. I don't know whether we've reached that conclusion yet, but that's the type of question that will have to be asked. It's not just a scientific question, it's a public policy question. And we'll try to discuss that as openly as we discussed the steps that brought us this far. Yes.
Newsom? Very brief. Has the Pentagon been asked to aid in the evacuation or protection of American and third country nationals in Guinea-Bissau?
My understanding right now is that the Portuguese have a freighter docked at Bissau, ready to remove Portuguese nationals, Americans, and as many people as they can fit on. I understand it has a fairly large capacity to take people out. The United States has sent some planes, I believe 2 or 3 C-130s to Dakar, Senegal, which is nearby. And we also have, I think, about 100 people there, so-called enablers, communicators, planners, a headquarters element, security people, ready to go in and aid Americans if they want to get out. The problem is the planes can't get in to Guinea-Bissau because the airport's closed. So right now the ship seems to be the best way to get out. And there are about 70 Americans, we believe, in the country. There could be more, but our records show there are about 70. About half of them are Peace Corps volunteers. About half of the Peace Corps volunteers are scattered around the country, outside of the capital. And we don't think that they're in any risk. The risk seems to be in the capital right now. We believe that a very small embassy detachment of 5 or 6 people is likely to stay, but that many Americans in the capital will come out. And I think this is ongoing right now. I know the ship is at the dock, and there are 44 people at last report, 44 Americans at the dock waiting to get on the ship and leave.
One clarification. Since you said that the CDM arrangement over the Aegean Sea is not partitioning the areas of operational responsibilities of the airspace and the sea, from the U.S. point of view, do you consider the entire area of the Aegean Sea controlled by Greece as in the past?
What I said was that I didn't accept your definition, your description, because I have to look at the details of the confidence building measures. So I think I'd like to go back and look again at the confidence building measures. Yes?
What is your reaction to a report that North Korea's Nodon is already operational?
Well, we've been watching the development of these missiles very closely, and we think that the development's complete. I don't think we're in a position right now to comment on whether they're deployed or operational, but we know that the development, we believe that the development of the missiles is complete. We've also stated very clearly on many occasions, and I'll restate, that proliferation of new missiles in the Asia-Pacific region is destabilizing, potentially destabilizing, and we don't think it's a good idea for North Korea today to be deploying new missiles. Clearly, North Korea needs to focus on feeding and clothing and caring for its people, and this doesn't seem to be the best way to do that.
What was the range of the Nodong?
The Nodong missile has a range of about 1,000 kilometers, we believe.
Thank you.
What kind of data do you say that the development is complete?
Sorry?
Based on what kind of data or proof do you say that development is complete?
National technical data that we, data that we assemble through our normal practices.
How long has it been complete?
I can't give you details on that.